about PIE in the arts, which is participation, inclusion and engagement in the arts sector, particularly in arts projects. I am Vicki Taylor, and the reason that I have interest in this area is because primarily because of my work that I did as part of my BA, as well as the fact that I have personal interests in the area as a direct result to experiences that I've had in regards to participation, inclusion and engagement. The aims and objectives of this presentation is to share my research findings and to share my argument about whether participation, inclusion and engagement PIE should be accessible to everybody, and to initiate further thinking in yourselves and to stimulate further thoughts on how you could take this further in your own arts practice or practice in general, and also obviously to have fun and learn something new. Okay, there are three components of PIE: participation, inclusion and engagement. But there's a question that will be addressed in this presentation, which is whether or not these components are equal in the way that we use them and address them within arts projects. So my argument, as I've already mentioned, is that PIE must be accessible to all participants, and that will be made more clear as we go along this presentation. Okay, so my research methods and methodology, I'd like to explain in terms of a recipe, as we're talking about PIE. So the methodology is like the actual recipe, whereas the methods are the ingredients within that recipe. And so for the research that I have done and am doing for my argument about PIE in the arts sector, I did you need 192 grams of desk study, which represents the 192 hours that I spent doing my desk study. 150 grams of questionnaires, which represents the 150 people I sent the questionnaire to, although the questionnaire is actually open to anybody, so I could get more than 150, but the response rate never equates up to how many you send out anyway, not unless you use some kind of magic. 25 grams of interviews, which represents the 25 people that I hope to interview at a later stage after this presentation. And the same goes with the 5 grams of focus group, who could involve some of you here today. So if you look on the presentation or look at your handout if that's easier, you can see that the ways in which I approached my research, starting off with my desk study and then integrating in the questionnaires, the data that contained from the questionnaires, and then leaving them to incubate, so that ideas can be formed from that can be taken through to help me to form my questions for the interviews, so that the interviews become more focused, and so we end up with a very, very focused focus group. That's piping hot. Okay, the first activity that I'd like you to participate in we're going to split you into 2 groups, and you're going to, in your envelopes, there's a sheet like this one, which has various different approaches to doing a project. In this case, an arts project, but it could be any project. But some of these are things that will help to achieve PIE, participation, inclusion and engagement, and some of these won't. And your job is to try and work out which ones will achieve PIE and which ones won't. And each of these are numbered, and on the back of these little tiny jigsaw pieces you have numbers, and one jigsaw will turn out as a PIE and one won't. So you have 5 minutes to do that. You can decide which one.
I'm going to pause it and do.
Yeah. What was it that What was in it? Well, no, if it's number one, about inclusion. Oh yeah, yes. Maybe. As in literally loads. Using that as a starting point. Adaptations made to activity to support progress.
Yeah. Change things too much.
Yeah,
Will this lead to
A good time.
yeah.
Okay.
That's number one.
Okay.
Cool.
Broad remain form.
Yep.
Form. Broad catchment area.
20.
Nope.
What do you say no?
Sorry.
What do you mean by broad catchment area for participants?
So to have instead of having just Aston, to then open it up to the whole of Birmingham, so that more people can join in.
So therefore, in theory, being more inclusive.
In theory.
17. Yes.
You say yes.
Is that fine?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although you could say it's a bit of a question mark in some ways, because sometimes if you're trying to be all and do all for everyone, you're not actually achieving anything for anyone.
And there's areas like the cold spots, aren't there, where they're trying to make sure that there's cohesion.
Creative thinking, good problem solving.
Well, it was a question mark because it was personal. I'd hold on to that, so maybe.
Intention. We can say that's it. Yeah. Who's not too long in the park?
Encourages
Flexible activities, no?
the minimum catchment area for yes.
How do you know then? Because it's sort of the opposite.
I mean, should we say open question mark?
Yeah. Minimum of support. Multiple modes of learning address. Yes. No, that's fine.
29. Shut up.
Yeah.
Multiple styles of learning dress. Yeah. Although I think that the barrier is, in terms of multiple styles of learning, there's a theory behind that, and does everyone have a shared understanding of what the theory is? As in, that's quite an academic, there's an intuitive thing, but there's also an academic thing about sort of different learnings, literally different learning styles. So how do you connect to people visually in terms of audio stuff, kinesthetically? So that is really important, but often your starting point is that you're not all at the same level of understanding and experience and non-fluctuating structures.
30.
That is in 30, but
Yes.
still like quite a little question mark because it's about growth and change and
14.
We'll see if that comes together. 14, no, 14's a maybe.
Fluctuating one.
So maybe enough.
You're doing very well.
yeah.
Cheated.
I mean, we know
27
We know
is
that.
a no.
13.
13 is a yes.
Vicky,
Mm-hmm.
when you say non-fluctuating structures, what do you mean by fluctuating?
Structures that can be changed and
like adaptable and flexible.
It is now.
So you mean a space where change doesn't happen?
can I get back to you on that?
Or is it about it being erratic?
It's bad, right?
It sounds bad.
Yeah. Because we need to be able to adapt
The
to that.
word is...
Yeah, it's a word. Yeah.
Should we say local?
But,
Or should we say
well, it goes in, I guess. But
we like it expression? Is
no,
it
we
that?
want it.
Oh, we want it.
Yeah, because she's saying they don't adapt if they're not fluctuating. We want structures that are adaptable. Cool.
So we say no to non-fluctuating structures.
Oh yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
No, that's not. Person-centred.
Yes, I think we've
Prominent learning style approach. Well, that does happen. Because I suppose if you're taking an advanced section, it's going to be kinesthetic, isn't it, mainly, but an audio. But
Do you have my permission?
I say
Signed consent.
it does happen, but I don't think it should, because even
What,
if
from
you're
the
doing
learning
dance, you could still rely on visual.
Yeah,
like
and
different
what's
styles of learning.
Yeah. What, from an learning style approach? No. We don't want that.
But then, like, say for example, if you're a theatre, like if you do
Yeah.
drama, you might, there will be one as a starting
I think it's
point
like
to
one of the
finish it.
scary masks.
The clown.
I don't think it's okay. It's not, I mean, open to other styles. They're not just saying, well, if this is dance, this is the way it's taught, so.
Let's say no, but then put question mark. It's very subjective, isn't it? Some of them are easier to see.
Croissant.
Yes,
Is it croissant? Yay.
Prominent learning.
I was considering a different
Because
different
people learning.
thing that you can
So
create
you're
with
choosing-
the same materials, in the same way that you can create a project using the same materials but different approaches, have different fillings.
Mm-hmm.
What is it?
Pardon?
Prominent learning style approach, actually, learning style approach. People will have a prominent learning style approach. But you can be nurtured in terms of your own.
Slightly lost.
It's very academic,
Because
this is.
there's three.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which.
Because I think when it's a learning style approach, it's a person who's a learner, that they've got a particular prominent way of learning, which is generally speaking true.
Yeah. Isn't that the same as prominent mode learning? How do they differ?
I was assuming that mode of learning would be the learning tool. Yeah, the learning tool.
That's inclusive.
It leads to the rest of the presentation. The things that you're addressing in your questions will be addressed later.
I've got a question because there are prominent things, but the idea is that you still agree.
We can safely say that reasonable adjustment should go in.
Yeah.
If you'd all like to come back. How did you find that activity? This group will be able to tell the other group what the outcome of the activity was in terms of what was the other creation that was created.
Was it pie?
Yeah, there was a pie, and what was the other?
Well, it made us, none of what was created as such apart from the teamwork, and it made us as Sarah said think more about some of these bits and pieces in certain areas that maybe aren't considered as often as they should be. What was created?
Yes,
the jigsaw puzzle?
yeah, but what was the picture was it?
Oh, the other picture, a croissant.
Okay.
Right, okay.
So there was a picture of a pie and a picture of a croissant. Because they both used the same material to be created, they both used pastry. But the ways in which the item is approached changes what it then becomes. So the reason why I chose those as the pictures is because I wanted to show that if you approach things differently and put different fillers into things, it changes what they become. So if you take approaches that angle more towards participation, inclusion and engagement, then you're more likely to achieve a project looking like this, whatever this is. Whereas if you chose things that didn't angle towards participation, inclusion and engagement, then you have something that can be very, very different in terms of the outcome. And this leads me on to the findings of my desk study, which is where I got a lot of the statements and approaches that were written on your sheets for that last activity from. And my desk study itself is one of your handouts, which is the bigger, thick one. This one. Did you look at it? And in my research, my desk study research, I found out that when looking through a range of sources, including journal articles, previous research studies, both qualitative and quantitative, I found that for pie to be created and used effectively within projects, there needs to be a variety. This is both a variety of activities in the projects, but also a variety of ways in which somebody can access the activity. So different ways of approaching that activity. For instance, you could have a theatre project, a theatre activity within a project, where a group, the intended activity is for that group to create a piece of drama. However, some people might not feel comfortable doing that, or they might have different needs or different interests that is making it very difficult for them to participate, engage or be included in that activity. Therefore, you can have different angles towards that same activity. For instance, somebody could film the activity if they prefer filming, or they could think about the music that could be used, or the lighting, or they could direct. And there's a whole range of different ways that you can look at activities without changing them completely. This applies also to being flexible, adaptable and accommodating to the needs of participants. And they we're coming across in almost all of the research, the desk study research that I completed, which really evidenced the need for projects to have that flexibility, to accommodate for everybody, and to think about the people within the project in order to achieve PIE effectively. There are also laws about inclusion, not just for disabilities, but all across the board. There's laws on sexual discrimination and racial discrimination. And because of these laws, it's very, very obvious that it is a requirement for all projects, no matter what sector they're in, they have to ensure that everybody is included, which means that everybody can participate and engage in their own ways with a project or an activity. And those laws are explained in more detail on your little brochure sheet. I also found that, and this goes down the more academic part of things, because these were found in more academic journals, so they were coming from a different angle to approach this type of study. But having a multi-sensory environment, everybody learns differently. And some people have preferred learning styles, such as the most common being VAC, visual, auditory and kinesthetic. However, not everybody will learn visually, not everybody will learn or through listening. Not everybody will learn kinesthetically. However, those that do learn that way, if the teaching or leading style accommodates for that and matches that style of learning that is preferred on the part of the learner or participant, it can work really, really well. However, it could result in excluding other people from learning adequately. So the best style to use, according to research, which could be questioned, is to have a multi-sensory approach to activities, so ensuring that any activities that you lead on or deliver, they have aspects of movement, physicalness, or listening, and visual. There's also another theory by Bruner, which is explained in the desk study, which is about the different modes of learning. And he mentions 3 modes of learning, which is the iconic, symbolic, and enactive. Not inactive, that's completely different, enactive. Which the iconic, if I was to ask you to think about a situation, or to draw a situation, that would be engaging with your iconic mode of learning. If I was to ask you to speak about and discuss with other people about that situation and to describe it and things like that, that would be symbolic. If I was to ask you to create it by physically moving, then it would be enactive, which draws similarities back to back, the visual, auditory and kinesthetic approach to learning. And so, again, if you were to have activities that contain discussing things, thinking about how things, imagery of things, as well as physically being physical with things. then you're more likely to achieve PIE according to the research that I've completed. And a big thing came out as well, particularly from previous qualitative studies that I looked into, which was the use of person-centred approach, which is when people see the participants and concentrate on the participants and what the needs and the interests are of the participants and put them first rather than the product. That can have its negatives, as can anything else. In terms of it's very, very time consuming, and a big consideration for that is if you are including someone, you could indirectly exclude somebody else because everybody's different and people might contrast in terms of their how they prefer things. Okay, activity 2 is about inclusion, and I'm going to give you all a piece of paper which will have a character on, and it will tell you about that character, and then you have to engage in an activity whilst remaining in character but trying to include everybody else in the group. Does anybody have any questions about that?
You only came from Bath.
Might be some raspberry colours.
We were
I
talking
think you're
earlier
very
about
sensible not to get the pie out, sorry.
me,
It's all right.
me and Alice are saying all my feedback's going to be I'll create different types of pies.
None of the animal.
David? Sarah? Brim?
Don't like pie.
How will we shape it?
Can't we do chocolate? Why do you have to do pie?
Does everybody like chocolate? You ever made a chocolate pie?
Yeah,
Cool.
of course, the chef.
And I can't use my hands. My hands.
I went in Roland as one of the early mobsters from India.
You were normal.
What were you?
I'm a foreign country, I didn't speak.
It wasn't clear what most people were. I could tell that you were deaf. Were you the support worker?
Sorry?
Were you the support worker?
No.
I'm just small.
Is that how we act? I sit in a corner and do tasks alone. So I was over here just trying to signal to you.
What was yours then?
You're a support worker. You're completely deaf.
You know it's an activity you will enjoy working together as a group rather than just but you're not sure what the activity is. You need to get more details from your leader. We've been here before. And you're a very young child and have been invited to participate in this activity due to your mother being a baker, which I assume was you. She often bakes you pie, but you don't like pie at all. You prefer chocolate.
Pulled it off.
Okay. You are the leader of the group. You're unable to use your arms. You need to run an activity with the rest of the group in which they need to produce a picture of their collective ideal flavour pie. The group must work together to produce one picture only rather than several individual pictures. You do have a support worker. Find out who this is. I can't read the arms.
What was your name?
You are a famous chef. You believe that you're the best chef on earth when it comes to pies. You believe that neither your way or no way. You do not like navigating flavours of your pies.
Excellent.
Okay. From the activity, hopefully, we'll have realised how difficult it is to include everybody in activities. Which creates a lot of tensions when the law is stating that you have to do it, but you have to then try and do it in a way that's going to include people from different countries, of different ages, of different abilities. And there are ways of doing it, but you have to think in a different way. In a way that can allow people to participate in activities no matter what their ability, gender, race, age or culture. Although age is one that the law states that you can discriminate against, but I don't like using that word, in terms of that you can put an age boundary on activities because of other laws that contrast that in terms of like child protection. You would stick adults that of particular ages or have particular needs with a very young child. Okay. As some of you will be aware, because you will have participated in it, I sent out my questionnaires, and the results of my questionnaires so far, although they could change because I'm still getting questionnaires, the data from questionnaires being sent to me all the time. But so far, the results have shown that everybody that has participated in the questionnaire believes that participation, inclusion and engagement are all important aspects in the project. With the majority of all of them being very important, that those three components of PIE are very important in projects. And that's not just arts projects, as some of the people that I sent the questionnaires to are not from the arts sector. And that was one of the questions on the questionnaire, was what interests they have in terms of, and there were some that says they were they did sports and fitness, and yet their responses are exactly the same as those that work in the arts sector and in the education field. There was also open-ended questions in the questionnaire, and there's some key words that were coming out of the questions, the answers, the data. And for participation, respondents spoke about they like to participate in things that are linked with their own interests. So if there's a project that they're interested in that lies within their interests, they'll participate in it. For inclusion, people spoke about support, and not everybody that answered, everybody answered it, but not everybody's answers that said support says that they actively and directly engage with that support. But having somebody there as support, no matter whether they engaged with that person or not, helped them to feel like they were included in the activity, even when they didn't directly engage with that person or people or support network. Engagement, the answers to engagement surprised me most out of all of them, partly because I'd never considered engagement before. I always thought that engagement was the same as participating, and so it's fine, you're either involved or you're not involved. And through my research I realised that engagement is actually much deeper than that, literally much deeper than that. In terms of engagement is when you are learning in depth, and when your brain, both parts of your brain are engaged in an activity, are active within an activity. And almost everybody that responded to the questionnaire mentioned that they felt most engaged with activities when they were physical, practical and hands-on. Which is really interesting because if you go back to the learning styles, that would fall under the kinesthetic or the enactive mode of learning. Which is really interesting because it shows how physical people want to be in order to engage with things. Although, in my opinion, I still believe that it's important to ensure that you have the auditory and visual stimulus as well to provide an activity that people can learn value from. Okay, the third and final activity is a discussion that I'd like you all to participate in. And the discussion is on to what extent PIE must be accessible to participants in arts projects, with a secondary focus, which is in what ways and to what extent can you achieve PIE in your arts projects or projects in the other sectors. And if you get stuck, there are some topic starters that might help you. Who'd like to start?
I think, Sonnet, that you will attend regular sort of reflective practice sessions, for example, to look at it, attend training, and it's an essential requirement of your job. Because I think the problem is even when you think it might be good for you, people don't prioritise it, you know, like, and then suddenly it's like it's just the responsibility of one person or one department. It just falls back to that default position.
Yeah. It's true, we're all guilty then. It's like you say, it just doesn't become a priority and we find ourselves putting other things above it.
But it's got to be a top-down, bottom-up approach as well. There needs to be leadership in it, whoever's leading an organisation or a project, to include everybody and kind of, you know, assess that level of responsibility with PIE.
And maybe that, like, you know, we talked a lot about child-centred approach to learning and just, or adult-centred, whoever it is, that it starts from the person. But even when you believe in that as an ethos, putting it into practice is extremely difficult, you know, sort of, and also sometimes you might think that something's going down the right track, but then sometimes you have to sort of see it from a different perspective to think, actually that's not quite right, or we need to put something else in place there. So it's sort of like a work in progress, I think. What do you feel about, because what you've done is drawn on mob in your research paper as well. And you've talked about dance routines and stuff like that, dance classes particularly being a highlighted area where perhaps it wasn't, the PIE wasn't properly cooking all the time. you know, and actually it was really interesting being a participant of a dance session last week for your leadership, you know, you leading a session, which was excellent.
Yeah.
But it's actually, it really makes you think about the visual and the audio still need to be there, and how do you create that inclusive environment and know, you know, but what do you feel about your experience here about the PIE?
I think once we're aware of things and we know about things more in depth, then we've kind of good at including people.
But it's an ongoing thing as well, though, isn't it? Because also, like, even when we were just doing that questionnaire earlier, some of the things that you said was clearly, you know, you've learned about different learning styles, so you know that. So there's an assumed knowledge there that's coming through, whereas actually it takes years for people to know about different things and different practices and or share, exchange things. So it's that dialogue that needs to happen along the way, and that you're not, no one is ever wrong, but it's being open to knowing that you can always keep developing and growing. Do you think it's important to have theory as well as practice? You know, like how we've had the training programme attached to this, but there's an extent to which, say if we had a future model of working, there'd be more action learning in there that was literally pure space to think and to, you know, for personal reflection and sharing, and, you know, critically looking at things and asking why. But that theory and practice is really important to go hand in hand, maybe. I don't know, that's my opinion.
How do you think we could? How do you think we could make PIE accessible to people in future arts projects?
Consultation and listening to people. Maybe at the start of projects, finding out people's interests, their needs, their abilities, and in a sense do tailor-made projects.
Even just actually critically for each deliverer, it's all at all levels, but also sometimes it does come down to a delivery level. It's about someone's personal practice. Maybe you need to just, part of your, well, it should be a requirement maybe that you have a session plan in place before, you know, people deliver, but it also says about, it's got PIE in it. So you're actually always, you know, you're looking at it all the time and thinking about, well, how am I doing this? How am I going to make this happen? Because I think sometimes people don't even know who they're actually working with and what they consider, what the considerations are.
But yeah, I do think that one should have a lesson plan or session plan and be conscious of PIE, because in some cases, even if you have had consultations and you've spoken to parents or people before they've done the activity, they may not be aware themselves that they actually have a condition, or their parents may not be aware. But if you as the deliverer are constantly, including PIE, or, you know, making sure that you're aware of people's differences, then when something does arise, you won't sort of back away. You'll have, you know, things in place to sort of accommodate that. Yes.
Does anyone else have anything to say?
Just about reflective practice as well. Like the same practice that you use in early years work, apply it to any activity that you're doing. So be making observations, checking in with your participants in different ways, reflecting afterwards, reflecting as a group, reflecting as an individual. So there's a cycle there of plan, do, review, not just do.
Yeah. Anybody else?
There's real PIE.
And can you please provide me with some feedback?
Really good. Excellent. Really well researched and really well presented.
Do you want to focus on the PIE? Oh, bless you.